Spoken Poetry Podcast is back.
Woo!
We are going to talk comedy with Taylor Duggar. What kind of comedy should we talk about?
I think today we're going to talk a little bit about bad comedy, the production company, whatever you want to call it, that I'm starting up, that I've been working on for the last year or so. So that's me. Follow me on Instagram. I'm Taylor Bad Comedy. And that pretty much says everything that I have about my social media presence.
All right, thank you so much. It's been a great show.
A great show, guys.
No, speaking of bad comedy, where did you come up with the concept, both the name and what you're doing?
The origin story. So I started doing comedy when I moved back to Colorado. So I had grown up in Colorado. I joined the military. I was gone for the better half of a decade, and never considered doing comedy. Seriously, or pursuing comedy, really. It was just kind of one of those things it'd be fun to do, kind of a bucket list thing. And after I started going to the mics, I was like, no, I think I really want to keep doing this. I want to keep going. And a lot of the places that I would go had a lot of technical errors,
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be sitting in the room going like, oh, this is bad. Like the lights would go out. You couldn't hear the audio because the PA was too quiet. Mics would cut. Just simple things that I would look at and go like, oh man, this would be such a good show if, these little things were tweaked. So what I had started doing was I went on, like, the origin story is not beautiful, but, I would go on my Instagram whenever these things were going sideways and there was chaos in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would hashtag like bad comedy, like welcome to, this is where we're hanging out on a Tuesday night or whatever. Look how terrible this is.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of making fun. More for the comedians, the people who are involved in doing comedy and in performing the open mics and working their new material for years and years on end. And it was a joke more for the back of the room, as we call it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of became an idea like, oh wait, no, this is like kind of funny, like bad comedy. This could be a brand,
Yeah.
And so I started producing shows and kind of fixing those little minor tweaks with the production side of it, and started calling it bad comedy. And I know right off the bat when people hear that, they're like, so, are the jokes bad? Are the performances bad? And no, they're great. We have the baddest comedians with the best content, and I try to reach out to anybody in the Colorado area who is looking to promote the little guy, the small business that I'm doing, and come down from faraway places, even Fort Collins or Denver, to come and perform here in Springs and give us a good comedy experience, and that's what bad comedy is.
And, we often, part of comedy, or the main part of comedy, is talking about words and how using them and how they're used in weird ways. And why is it that we basically are using these words in the negative? We use bad as good and things.
Right.
I mean,
I took it because from when I called it bad comedy, obviously it sounds like bad comedy, right? It's the opposite of good. But in the terms that I was thinking of, with the musical background that I have, I listen to a lot of, funk and soul and Motown and a lot of 70s era music where people would refer to good things as bad. Like, oh man, did you see that? That was bad as hell,
Yeah.
That motorcycle. And then I learned it was also kind of a biker term. In later years, like I guess now, when people would say like, oh, you're calling it bad like like bikers would, like, oh, that's bad as hell. That's that's basically sick as, and we could bleep that out. But you know what I'm saying.
Sick is a word I get a little confused. Like someone said, that's sick. I'm like, oh my goodness, should we call the doctor?
Right.
I get worried, but people...
and it's the opposition of it, right? Like
Yeah.
making it's, of course it's supposed to sound satirical,
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I came up with the idea. I'm like, oh, well, if we call it bad comedy, like, damn, that was bad as hell. And then also having it paired with the opportunity for people to misinterpret that. You come to a show and you think, oh, bad comedies, are the jokes bad? And then you see an amazing show, then you get it. Then the joke kind of clicks, And a lot of people have said, like, oh, with a name like that, you really kind of can't lose, But I can, okay? The jokes can be bad.
They can be.
They can be bad, and it'll be on brand, is, essentially how that turns out.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned military. What is your background?
Background, I was in the Air Force for 7 years. I got out after the pandemic, and I was stationed in Idaho, so it wasn't too far and culturally even too different from Colorado. But this is where my family and friends were. So when I did exit the military, I came back to Colorado. And in that time, I'd been stationed in Japan. I'd been stationed in Idaho. I had traveled the country. I had traveled several other countries when I was stationed overseas. And it gave me this, a lot of people think that veterans that get out of the military, they kind of hate it, or they have like a negative feeling about the military experience. And I'm not going to say that that was my experience. Like, I had a good foundation laid out for me with the career that I had. Got a lot of experience, both good and bad, but ultimately I didn't leave the military going like, anything like that. I left the military going like, I'm just going to decide my path now. That's the freedom aspect of it was what I was more craving. And I never told anybody that I was going to try and do comedy, but I imagine if I told people like, hey, I'm going to get out of the military and be a stand-up comedian, they'd just laugh in my face, because it's a long road and it's tough, You got to spend a lot of years crafting this art form.
So I got to ask, what was Idaho like? Or more seriously, what would you say were the differences of the places you've went, of what types of people you would meet?
I mean, Idaho was pretty isolated.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot like, if you're from the Colorado area, it'd be a lot like getting stationed in like Falcon, or even more remote even. So very small community, not a whole lot to do. You had to travel a lot to go to places. It'd be distance from Springs to Denver maybe for you to go see a concert. So very domestic life for me in that time frame. When I was stationed in Idaho, I had a dog and was trying to grow grass in the yard and the white picket fence and the girlfriend and all that kind of stuff. And just kind of more domestic lifestyle, home family building kind of thing. But not a whole lot of nightlife, not a whole lot of things that were accessible and close by. And it was called Mountain Home.
Mountain Home,
yep. So when I got the order saying you're going to Mountain Home, I was like, oh sweet, I can go snowboarding or something. And boy, was I wrong.
No mountains?
You get to Mountain Home, and it's the guy who named Iceland and Greenland, Because you get there and you're like, where are the mountains? Like they are there, but they're not in Mountain Home. They're over there,
Probably nothing like the Springs.
Oh no, yeah, the Springs has got it made with our accessibility to nature and the outdoors for sure.
What other countries and places were you stationed in?
I was stationed in Japan, like I said before, but I've actually never been to Europe as much as I've tried to travel and make my way over there. I spent a lot of time in Asia, which I loved. Not only Japan, which was one of the great, like if you've never been there, go. Don't go on a vacation to Jamaica or Hawaii or go on a cruise. Take a trip out to, Hokkaido or Tokyo even, something like that is what I always recommend. But
Kyoto.
Yeah, Kyoto. I hiked Mount Fuji when I was out there. I snowboarded in the northern part of Japan. I went to Thailand, so there was a lot of things that were close by in that area that were accessible enough for me to travel to, but at the same time very difficult. Like being in the military, there's a lot of paperwork,
Oh, yeah.
just to travel anywhere, right? So
I was a JAG. I know about the paperwork.
Exactly.
That's all we did is paperwork.
In order for me to travel anywhere, I would have to go and get like pictures taken of my tattoos just in case my body went missing, that kind of thing, So even though there was places accessible, the military's red tape made it, like intentional. If you're going to go someplace, you have to really kind of like commit to your plan. And I'm never really good at planning, so every single one of my trips was an absolute nightmare at my own fault, I traveled to Canada just to go snowboarding, and I mixed up my flight. I was supposed to leave at 12 in the afternoon, and I accidentally booked it for 12 at night because it wasn't military time on the internet. So that one little tweak threw off the rest of my like 10-day trip out there just by making that one showing up at midnight instead of 12 in the afternoon.
That's one of the transitions a lot of military folks, both when you enter and then when you leave, have to change your way you talk. Like the way dates and time What was that like about just, you have to learn
I
how
still
the
do,
order, how you
yeah.
write the date and even is different.
I still write the dates in military format. I still have my phone set to military time, and honestly, I think it's useful and it makes sense what military time is. And a lot of people, like, if they ask me what time it is and they look at my phone, they see 1700. It might be confusing to them.
Yeah.
But if I saw 5 on my phone, I would think it's 5 in the morning. And if I'm looking online to book a plane ticket, right? Don't make that mistake again, Taylor. Is, for me to understand that there's a difference between 12 at night and 12 in the afternoon. So in that aspect, it is kind of helpful. But having to transition back into being a civilian again, obviously, yeah, I'm still on that path. It's only been a few years, and I'm still learning how to break some of those old habits and the things that just aren't military anymore.
Most of your life, have you been kind of like the funny guy, or is this how did the jokes kind of go?
I think early on I started doing comedy essentially without being a stand-up comedian, because every comedian has always been the class clown probably. Many of the comedians grew up trying to be the funny guy in the room or the life of the party and things like that. And I don't think I was any different from that trope at all, but I think when it started kind of becoming a reality, along with me watching hours and hours and hours of stand-up comedies for leisure and pleasure, was Instagram and Snapchat when I was younger, and used those a lot more. I would tell the story feature, it was kind of like a new thing back then. Nowadays it's kind of standard practice. Obviously you can go through hours and hours of people's stories, but
it's new to me still.
Yeah, back when I was first starting it out, I would just sit there driving. I'd be parked at a stoplight or whatever and start telling my story like 10 seconds at a time, and that gained enough traction for me over the years where I would just talk about whatever inconvenient thing happened that day and make jokes of it or make light of tough situations through my story. And I would see, I didn't have that many followers, but I would see up to 200 people watching my stories, and people reacting and people laughing and reaching out. And then getting into the military, there would be people that I would post these stories and they would message me like, hey, you haven't posted a story today. What's going on? It's like, oh, I don't really have anything to say, that kind of thing. But I learned after a while that there were a lot of my homies that would get deployed that would gather in their work sections in their tent and like intentionally sit down and watch Taylor's story, or they would get home and sit down with their wife and be like, oh, Taylor started a story at lunch today. Don't watch it until we get home, kind of thing. It was like a little episode for them. And I think that was my first intro into doing stand-up comedy, was testing out my bits online and making people laugh on my stories. And then people started going like, oh, I like watching your stories, post more, do this. And then it became, you should try doing stand-up. And that was where the seed never came. That idea wasn't planted by me. I never said I should do stand-up. It was other people that were like, oh, these things that you're doing online are pretty funny, you should try doing this. And I think eventually I just kind of wore down to a point in my life where everything was just in shambles, and that's where a lot of people start comedy, is at their rock bottom almost, and want to kind of work through the trauma. And it just so happened that I was in that place. I was in a very dark place. I was freshly out of the military. I didn't really have a solid plan, as it turns out, when I got out. And then doing stand-up comedy, I was like, you know what? I finally found the thing that I like. There was a day it clicked. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. Like that day when you're a kid or whatever. I've always been jealous of anybody who knew what they wanted to do when they grew up, when they were younger. Like my sister is a great example. She started off in high school and said, I want to study psychology. Then she went to school for psychology, and now she's doing psychology, and she loves it. She knew what she wanted to do. And I've always been jealous of people that were able to just find their passion and like run with it and go in that direction. And I feel like comedy is that thing for me now.
And one thing that we have in common, I think we both are kind of finding our direction a little bit later in life.
Oh, for sure.
Than some other people. How much of this was a change in your? I mean, 'cause military is more of a conservative kind of background as far as how we live our lives, as far as how we behave, what substances we are able to use, things like that. How much of a change was it for you, this new life?
Man, it's hard to even put into words. because like I said, not trash talking the military, but it's very regimented, right? I wake up and I wear the same things all week, right? The same. I don't have to pick my clothes now. I have to dress myself, and that's been one of the toughest parts of me getting out. Is like now I don't just wake up and know what I'm gonna wear. I wake up and I'm like, I have to put together my out, which as you guys can tell is not that fancy, but you know what I'm saying? Like those little things where it's like it was taken care of for you already in the military. You knew what you were going to wear, you knew your hours, you knew when lunch was, and it's just routine. And after a while it becomes like now I have to build my own schedule, I have to build my own routine, I have to dress myself, I have to fill out my own paperwork, I have to apply for health insurance on my own. Nobody is just giving me the correct forms and telling me, how to do things correctly so that it's done correctly. It's more of you're completely on your own, and the camaraderie that they tell you that you're going to miss when you leave the military is like now you have to find a place for that, and that might be sports or for me comedy. Build in the scene, having that brotherhood or whatever you want to call it, and then having to learn how to just do everything on your own, which is scary when you look as dumb as me.
I wouldn't say that, but I am so glad that you brought that up. And one of the things you said in particular kind of hit me when you're talking about picking out your clothes.
Yeah.
Because, there is this thing called decision fatigue. And sometimes when we have to make all these different decisions in our life about important things, our brains get full. Or I don't know how else to say it.
Overwhelmed, yeah.
Yeah. And I have my day job where I'm a lawyer and I'm making decisions that are going to affect people's lives, and I have to do these things right. And then I get up in the morning sometimes and I can sit there for 10 minutes thinking about what I'm going to wear.
Yeah.
And I don't have that many clothes.
Mm-hmm.
There's only a few things to choose from.
Yeah.
But that really can happen, and I'm not sure why, but I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, that's something that I don't think people even think about when it's like, oh, you get out of the military, so you must be traumatized. Did you see battle? People have asked me if I've ever killed anybody. Just don't do that. First of all, if you ever think anybody's killed anybody, probably don't.
Yeah, it's not something.
That's just a tip.
You don't want to casually talk about something that serious.
Yeah, and it is serious.
You don't want to. Yeah, you don't want to walk up to someone and say, "Hey, tell me about some horrible tragedy in your life."
Now, on the other hand, I didn't go through those experiences that maybe a lot of other people did, which I'm grateful for. But the assumption I'd gotten from being in Colorado, especially a very heavy military and veteran city, is, I'll be like, oh, I used to be in the military, so people automatically think I'm disgruntled and upset with the government, or that I, was exposed to very traumatic events, and these are just kind of like the generalizations and stereotypes of veterans here, and I'm like, no. There's people that just they go in, they get their education, maybe they're going to school now, I'm going to school now, they start a business, maybe they open up a restaurant or whatever. Like they're normal people that had a job, and that job is very different from obviously not every job. It's still, the military could be very corporate. We still have OSHA. We still have to wear our PPE on the job site. It's blue collar and white collar jobs all working together, and each individual person that were in those jobs when they transition out have a lot of skills of working with the greater community of jobs, that are out there. And my experience has been getting out, the job market's crazy.
Yeah.
I really thought there was going to be more opportunities for higher paying, better positioned jobs for people with credentials and military experience. But when you're in a place saturated with folks that are already out of the military, it's like your resume is one of 1,000 resumes that have the same credentials on it. So it's a tough market for work, and it's a tough market for. Well, I guess I wouldn't say a tough market, but it's the support group is there. I will say that there are people in Springs that are working with all the organizations, the Wounded Warrior Project guys, the vet bars that are nonprofit. Wackadoo actually is a good time to pitch them in there. Is one of the venues that I work with doing stand-up comedy, and we have a monthly show there, and they're a nonprofit. So they're a nonprofit brewery, which I don't think has ever been done, at least in Colorado Springs. They started at a VFW. They donate their money back to 9 different nonprofit organizations, and that's something that you can't put a price tag on. That's priceless to me, to be able to do what I love doing in a place that's also trying to give back to people that are almost specifically in my position, starting a new chapter of their life.
Sounds like we need to make sure people know about this place. You said
Yes.
Wackadoo. What exactly did you... That can go pretty fast for some people, that phrase.
Wackadoo Brewing, yep. Wackadoo, and I love the name too. It's kind of perfect for comedy in that sense. And the reason they picked the name is they said, we're all vets. We're all little wacky, as they put it, and we all started this place together, and this is where the wackos hang out, And Wackadoo Brewing, we do a monthly showcase on Fridays. We got one coming up, like I said earlier, on the 22nd of November, and that'll be with our headliner, Liv Tyler, Mel Clemma, and Sam Ellefson. So, all nationally touring and headlining comedians coming through, and doing it in a spot that is very community driven, And, shout out UFB for allowing me in their venue space to talk about this too.
Of course, I guess that's the perfect time for us to talk about where we are now. We are at Ultra Flat Black, the #1 place for artists, and they do so much for all the local community in Colorado Springs. Whether you are a painter, drawer, sculptor, they put up all kinds of beautiful things.
Graffiti artists, like the side of the building even.
Yes.
To your point, this has been a really good, Ultra Flat has been awesome for the comedians believing in us. And that's another thing, man. It's for an event space to really believe in the artists that are trying to grow and progress, and giving us a space and a foundation, and not only just the basics, but they're involved. They want to see people progress and grow and display what they've worked on. The artwork in here, the hip hop artists, the metal shows, the poetry, the stand-up comedy, all these art forms are bring it in. Let's see what you get. Let's put you out there. And that is the most important thing when it comes to trying to produce shows, to me, is finding the owners and the event spaces that are hell yeah, comedy, we love comedy, let's do comedy. Then they get pumped about it, and that's exciting to me.
Can it be difficult to find the appropriate space? What is that business end of this like?
Yeah, the production side, because there's, comedy, I think people would assume we're constantly writing jokes, or we're being silly out in public all the time, we're trying to be the class clown. And yes, right. Yes, and.
There's an and.
There's the backside of that is okay, you've got jokes. Where do you perform? How do you get people to laugh? How do you get a group of people in there? So for indie shows, as I'm putting on, having a venue that supports what you're doing is great. Having seats, just there's a lot of things that people probably would assume any bar, restaurant, or venue has as a performance space that sometimes they don't. There's places like breweries. You can't throw a stick in Colorado without hitting a brewery, right? Mm-hmm. So there's tons of brewery shows around here. And some of those places will have a very large event area. We can fit a lot of people. Everything's accessible. It looks like a great showroom. And then we're okay, well, let's put the stage over there. And then we can't move the tables or chairs because they're bolted to the ground, or they're made of 3/4 inch thick steel with concrete on top, so it's you can't really make the room a room sometimes, and it's those minor details that when you go into a space, you're oh, this will be great, look at all this room. And then you find out oh, okay, but it's right next to the bathroom, or it's right next to the entrance, or the dishwasher is constantly running, or they had a special unblended drinks, and now there's a comedian up there trying to tell his jokes to a crowd of people while there's just loud blended cocktails being made in the background, so it's little minor things like that. When you walk into a venue, I try to pay attention to and say not is what are the check marks for this being a good space, but what are the check marks for this being a bad space, right? Bad comedy, right? Yeah. So I have a list of things that I look for that people may not think to go in there and pay attention to.
That's a great point, because I've noticed in some other venues, someone's doing a performance, and then there'll be the blender going, mm-hmm. or some really loud noise, and
doors slamming.
Yeah, and depending on what you're doing, it might not matter, but if it's music in particular, it can make it really disturbing. And just depending on the comedy setting, I know I've kind of screwed this up, interrupting people before. But sometimes, what is that? What is that like? You're telling a joke and you're ready to do something, and then some obnoxious person like me ruins it.
You get pulled away from the joke. You got to dig yourself out, you know. The baddest comedians will handle hecklers admirably. The baddest comedians will show up on time. These are like a little list of the crucibles of what bad comedy is going to be eventually one day. You know, but the searching for a venue, having the support of the owners and the bar staff. Because I've done shows at places, right, where, I got a head nod over there like, hell yeah. And it's...
from our silent studio audience.
It's going into a venue and getting ready to do a show, and the bar staff has no idea that there's a show that night. Like, things like that. Or they didn't post the flyer, or they didn't promote online, or, you know, just like things that are unprepared from the venue perspective that, it, you know, doesn't matter if you bring your best jokes to the stage if the foundation is not there, you know, if it's missing.
Yeah.
So.
And that's one thing I've noticed at some of the other places is they may have some wonderful people working there and they have a wonderful bartender, and you get there for your show and no one said anything about it.
Yeah.
And it feels, especially when you have some wonderful bartender who has friends that could be promoting it and getting people there. It's very sad in other locations that can happen on occasions.
So it's you know, level one background. You got to find a good venue with you know, the space to make comedy go well, right? Because anybody you could do. I've seen comedy done in bodegas in New York. I've seen people do comedy in Denny's. I've seen people do comedy at gas stations. Like, you can do comedy in places as long as there's people that are there to see it. You know, that they're there for the intention of sitting down and hearing your performance, right? It can be done. But to set people up, like the comedians specifically, to set them up for success is to have like a lot of those things ready for them to go up and bring their best jokes. That way they don't have to worry about the door slamming or ticket sales or trying to promote because they didn't see anything online about it, you know, that kind of stuff. And that is becoming my job now. Yes, I have to write new material. Yes, I have to host. Yes, I have to tell jokes. But I also have to make flyers and print them and talk to people and put them on Eventbrite or, you know, whatever avenue for ticket sales we're doing, and tracking the ticket sales, and then the algorithm, right? Trying to play the social media route. You know, it's constantly changing, and it's difficult for me to keep up as somebody who isn't that great with technology, you know, doesn't keep up with my posting. And that's probably the second half of production for me. It's like, yeah, we have to show up with the equipment working and the comedians ready to perform, but I also have to come up with content that I post online. I got to take pictures and videotape and edit and hashtag things, and then like all the little things that doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal for you to, like, oh, I'll take a picture and post it, right? It might take me an hour to get one advertisement out there.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up also, because one thing I feel handicapped myself in a way, being older and not being as fluid with all of this social media stuff. I mean, I know there are some people, you know, who are almost my age, who are excellent at it, like our friend Art the Poet, who can do anything on social media.
Shout out Art.
And I am just so amazed by it, but I really struggle, and sometimes even when I'm going to do something simple, I like second guess myself. It's like, oh, you can't do that. Do you ever feel weird about that?
Yeah. For example, just the other day I had to make a post for a show, and I clicked on the flyer that I'd already made, and I realized later that there was an issue with the flyer. Okay, so now I have to take down that post, right? Oops. Okay, luckily I only posted it 20 minutes ago. I could take it down, probably not that big of a deal. Let me fix that. And then I fix it and I go back in there. And I'm like, okay, well, I forgot to tag everybody. Okay, so now let me rewrite the post. Just like little things like that, where it was something that should have probably taken me like 20 minutes to just make sure to iron out all the details, is now taking me 45 minutes. And that's me sitting on the couch with my phone, right? It's not like I have a laptop and screens around, you know, like a computer hacker. I just have my cell phone and my dog who's licking me, trying to get attention because I'm not paying attention to him. I'm paying attention to my phone for 45 minutes, you know? And that's the struggle of somebody who, if I was better, it's like you said, a little bit of a handicap on the networking aspect. is if I was more skilled in that area, it would take me so much less time and probably be more effective. I don't know how to advertise, period. I don't know how to advertise, you know?
That's the hard part. And do you ever post something, think it's great, and then you look at the post, and then you see the most innocuous thing, like a word is spelled wrong?
Mm-hmm.
I do that, and then I'm like, oh no, I got to take this down.
Yeah, time to redo it.
I put the I and E in the wrong order that no one else is even going to notice.
Yep.
But I notice it, and I don't know. I don't know if it's a OCD or something else, but
I mean, you're probably very detail oriented when it comes to like your background and your job. You can't really make clerical errors because that's the difference between. It could be even winning and losing a case. You know, a clerical error can throw off your. If a clerical error shows the wrong date on a show, people aren't going to show up on the right date. You know, so the details matter.
It's another tip for all of you guys putting posters out. Put the date, time, and address.
Yep.
Sometimes I see like a post pop up and, oh, this looks like a great show. And I'm not familiar with it. And I can't even tell if it's in Colorado Springs or if it's in New York or something. I mean, so that could be very frustrating when I see a great show and then I like, oh, I want to go to this. And then it turns out it's in like Tennessee or something.
Yeah. I mean, I follow tons of different groups between, you know, Instagram and Facebook. And I haven't been active on either of those platforms for probably like 2 years before I started comedy. So I had gotten off of social media completely. I loved it. Oh my God, guys. Not having social media is like one of the greatest feelings in the world. I managed to do that for like a year and a half where I would meet people and they would say like, oh, you're really cool. Let me follow you on Snapchat or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I don't have it. Like if you want to talk to me, get my phone number. That kind of thing. And it was very freeing for a very long time until I started doing comedy where I'm like, okay, well, this is a necessary part of the business, you know? Yeah. You need to be able to post your content. You need to be able to tell people and reach out about whatever events are going on. So therefore, I had to create new accounts just for comedy wherein I have a handful of 100 followers and that's my reach right now, you know? So, and it's starting off a new enterprise anyway, right? I'm looking at this as like my business, you know, Bad Comedy as a production company or whatever you want to call it, a stand-up comedy troupe, you know, label it however you will. It's just like that is something that I treat as a job to invest in myself, in comedy, for a career that, you know, not try to be famous and on SNL or anything, but I would like to have a sustainable living doing what I love doing, right? And this is the entry-level part that I'm in right now, my first couple of years of comedy, where it's like, yep, now I have to do social media. Yeah. I might have to build a website. You know, I might have to invest money into advertising. I might have to, you know, run around with my shirt off with a flyer on myself in the middle of town to try to gain attention, you know, and take video of it and then post it, you know, like, or do 3 reels a day is the new challenge, I think, that a lot of comedians are reaching towards their goal. And having to do all those things to get one show advertised, to get a room full every time, you know, that's a job. It's a full-time job. And then we also have full-time jobs. So
we've been talking a lot about, you know, kind of this business end. So pretty easy to get rich and make tons of money.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. If I keep continuing on this path that I'm on right now, maybe in 15 years, you know. Yeah. And that's usually the track. I feel like, is most people in comedy have benchmarks, right? Like people that have been doing comedy far longer than I have will say like, oh, once you hit this mark, once you hit that mark, once you hit that mark, and they're pretty fairly close to accurate. The only difference is comedians 10 years ago that are now 10 years into comedy are facing the same challenges that people 3 years into comedy are having right now, which is the internet. You know, having to incorporate that as part of your product, your personality, who you're trying to get a fan base. You know, so it's not just about performing on stage, but keeping the audience engaged when you're not on stage, letting them know where you're going to be, when you're going to be there. God, I'm excited to see this person. Oh man, that guy's going to be, you know, in Denver. Let's go. You know, and that's part of the job that we have now, along with networking. You know,
how difficult is it to actually make a living in the? I mean, do you have? I mean, does anyone?
I'm not making a living on it right now, so.
I mean, like it's all like the local comedians we see. I mean, none of these guys are doing it full time. It seems like.
No.
I mean, what does it take to get to that level?
You know, I was talking about this with somebody the other night too. Is the perception of comedy, right? Like, it's not the '90s anymore, right? Because in the '90s it was very, '80s and '90s comedy was so hot. It was so hot, and people would fast track into comedy and burn out really quick. You know, and we've seen several examples of this. You know, some of the greats. You know, Mitch Hedberg or Chris Farley. You know, John Blue. These people that would get famous and then ultimately party themselves to death. And I think that became kind of a stereotype for a little while in stand-up comedy specifically, where it was kind of a rock and roll lifestyle. You know, to be a stand-up comedian, you gotta be a little bit crazy, a little bit kooky, and that's just what you do. You do stand-up, and then you party until the early morning, and then you do it all again. And that's the life of the modern-day comedian. And in reality, most of the working comedians that I know have at least 2 jobs, or they have one job that's their primary thing. Comedians are not only having to take care of their life and their families and their whatever, right, with their full-time jobs, their school. Some of them are doing both and then doing comedy. The comedians that I've seen in Colorado Springs, because it's really the only boat that I've been in as far as comedy, are some of the hardest working people that I've ever met. And they're working around the clock. They're doing a Friday night and then waking up on Saturday to do something else, and then Sunday night and then waking up on Monday to do something else. So it's kind of a never-ending thing to keep on top of this, and I think that's the struggle that I am complaining about. Essentially, is oh man, I wish I could just do comedy all the time. Why do I have to go to work and go to school, and damn, I forgot to do laundry again. So I think the stereotype from being rock star comedians to being just very hardworking business people, the higher up in the comedy ranks you go, all the way up to A-lister, have shows that they've written, right? So they're writing all the time. They have podcasts. They have TV shows and pilots that they're working on. It's not just one thing. To survive in the culture of comedy, you have to be very good at multiple facets of show business, not just stand-up. And for me, I think it's exciting because as much as I love writing jokes and getting laughs, it's also about creation. So it's yes, I get to do stand-up comedy, and that's a creative outlet for me, and I get to work through some of those dark places and those traumas, and that's a very me thing. That's beneficial for me. But as far as, personally, interpersonally really, but as far as business goes, it's not just about being funny. Mm-hmm. It's not about, getting a room of people to show up. It's also about, what kind of other opportunities can I do that's also comedy related? Making sketch comedies, or writing TV show pilots, or making a comic book, or drawing cartoons for our events. It gives me the creative outlet to do anything, and then just kind of bring it in the realm of comedy.
Yeah. Now, what would you say to people who are looking for gigs? They want to be on bad comedy, maybe. Obviously, you want to be funny, but is there things you're looking for besides just are you funny?
Man, this is an issue that every comedian faces, including myself, where if we're in a small market like we are in Colorado Springs, right? Bigger markets like Denver and, Austin or New York, LA, places that will be very busy with show business type things. Colorado Springs doesn't have a ton of it, right? It's growing now, obviously, but it's because of the little guys. It's the little guys like me and the people who perform here at Ultra Flat and that are looking for new spots to bring different parts of the Springs live shows. And getting booked is I think one of the things that is becoming more necessary or prevalent is having footage, taking video of your sets, being able to send clips to people who are booking shows, and we all have to build a resume.
How much does reliability for I mean, frankly,
Yep.
I mean, it can be. I mean, how much does your reputation matter as far as are you going to show up on time and do what you say you're going to do? Is that a thing?
Absolutely. And as the a guy who's been booking shows and hosting these shows, it's constant stress. Like, one, is the show going to go well? Are we going to have good ticket sales? Are we going to have people in the room? All the entry level things before the show starts, And then the show starts and it's like, okay, are they going to go up there and hit them with the funny, Yeah. Because if I'm going up on stage and being like, man, this next comic coming to the stage is a freaking rock star and you're going to laugh your pants off, and they kind of go up there and don't really tell jokes or, are not taking it as seriously as they maybe could with whatever audience they're working with, then I'm sitting in the back like, come on, bud, come on, dude, just, let's hit him with a funny, because if you're watching the time and you're watching the audience and you're advertising somebody as like a rock star on the stage coming up, get ready to laugh, and it's kind of like they bomb or they maybe say something that pisses a crowd off or something like that. Well, now that sets up, I have to go up on stage after that. And then not only that, but be like, all right, please stick around because we have, more on the lineup, that kind of thing. So it is stressful to be behind the scenes and hoping that the people that you're working with take it as seriously as you, that they go up there and they care about doing a good job, because if they have been working in comedy for any amount of time, they would know that it's not easy to try to put on a show,
One thing I sometimes have a hard time with, and I wonder if you have a similar experience, is coming out of our military backgrounds, we're used to, you got to be somewhere on time. If you're supposed to be somewhere at 2000 hours, you better be there
15 minutes early.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it seems like nothing starts on time.
No, comedians are artists. Artists are not on time. Musicians are not on time. Just as a general stereotype. But I mean, I think time it's everything for. Well, it is everything. That's all we have, just from a philosophical standpoint, time is the most valuable thing, but having an understanding of time, not just, you go on at 9, make sure you're there on time, but also it's like you have to be aware of your time on stage. Right. You got to be respectful of what that time means. Are you going overtime? Are you cutting, some material out and going under time? Open mics is a big thing, right? Like, I've done this several times. I am the worst. I've gone over at almost every single high stakes open mic that I've ever been at. I've been given the light. I've almost been cut the mic. Just, I definitely have pushed the boundary almost every single time I do a higher stakes open mic, like at Looney's or on Comedy on State, or for a while there, Nano 108 was like, they were really tight with their schedule. And if me, right, as the comedian, are getting 5 minutes, right, you better use every 5 of those minutes if you have it, right? But also, everybody else only gets that same 5 minutes. So if I go over 45 seconds, I'm robbing time from the people coming up after me, And to be respectful of time as a host and as a comedian and as a showrunner is probably one of the most important things to having a successful show, I think.
I imagine it can be a little difficult because, on one hand, you got to keep people on time for the audience and for the other comedians who are going to perform. But do you sometimes worry about, I'm being too harsh on someone for cutting them off? Or what is that like?
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think I've cut anybody early. Usually I will tell people, here's your time frame, and it's usually 10 minutes. For certain shows, I'll be like, all right, everyone's getting 10, and then we're doing this, right? A 10 is a good amount of time to have at one of these indie shows, I feel like. It gives people a little bit more room to stretch out their legs, but also keep it tight, Having 20 minutes or 15 minutes or more, you get a little bit of breathing room where you get to stretch out some of these jokes and embellish some of those things. And then 10 minutes is a time frame where it's like you can do that, you can stretch the legs, you can embellish some of these jokes, but also 10 minutes is a good amount of time, if you've written your set well, to almost have a tight 10, because most people are worried about their tight 5s, and then they'll do a type 5, and then they'll come up with another type 5, and they'll just smash them together, and they'll call that a type 10. When really, everybody has started out, I feel like the same way. I started noticing like, okay, but these two sets, they don't really go together in that order. Maybe I should take a few from here and move them there. And then I start developing the storyline as a more organized kind of thing, and that's what develops into a set. Because it's not about every joke that you've ever written equals 20 minutes, and that means I have 20 minutes. It means, what is your performance looking like in the amount of time that I'm giving you? It's like a boxing match every time. It's you versus the crowd, and it's a different opponent every time. And you're jabbing, and you got to know when to throw the punches. And in the same way, it's like any other sports analogy. It's like ballet. It's like painting. You go up there and you get this amount of time to just wow the audience, Yeah. And being respectful of that time, knowing that time is valuable, goes a long way for me. When people go up there and they're like, oh, I'm only getting this amount of time, or something like that, or they do get a good chunk of time and they go up there and just kind of fart around on the mic. I'm sure we've all seen that, especially open mics. That's kind of the space to air out some of the junk. But as a performer, learning when to dispose of some of that time and when to use it properly, I think is what makes just the most successful comedians as successful as they are.
We've been talking about comedy. It's all been this serious discussion.
Yeah.
And speaking of
this is funny
serious, there's more than jokes in your artistic mind.
Right.
What else is going on in your artistic mind besides funny stuff?
Well, I grew up. My first love was music, so I grew up playing guitar and learning different instruments. I was a metalhead, or am a metalhead, so I started out learning metal riffs on the guitar and kind of going into that music. And then when I started making music of my own, it was definitely heavy, hardcore stuff. And if you're not a metalhead, the common thing is people say it just sounds like noise, especially, when it would involve screaming vocals and things like that. People like, it just kind of sounds like nonsense, and gets dismissed, when in reality, that is, like, hardcore music is one of the most cathartic expressions of poetry to me. Like, not only do I get to write out something maybe that comes off as darker, heavy metal, but then also being able to physically express myself, whether it's headbanging, drumming, or screaming, and I get to emotionally express myself. And I think the last poem I wrote, I had part of it memorized, and it is comedy related. Now, it was kind of late at night, a little depressed, kind of wanted to journal something out, and I was feeling like writing something down, so I grabbed my notebook and I look around my house and I don't have a single pen. And I mean, I'm digging through my junk drawers. I'm looking in the cups in the kitchen. I'm looking around and realize, how long have I been doing stand-up comedy and I don't have a single pen in my house? How have I been how am I saying I'm a joke writer and I don't have a utensil to write these jokes? And the only thing I found was a pen. I want to say it was a gift, and it was like a multi-tool. You know what I'm talking about? Like, it's like a hard metal thing, and it unscrews, and it's got a flashlight on it, and it's got like a little pointy tip on it in case you need to break a window. Like, who needs this thing? And then it was like, of course I never used it. And the poem I wrote is, my only pen is a knife.
Well, do you have this poem? Would you like to share some of it with us?
I want to say if I could remember any of it, because I lost the entire notebook, so somebody out there is reading something that sounds kind of threatening, I feel like. The knife being, or the pen being the knife is the same thing that they've said in government as far as, like, being the sword. And how powerful that is. And for me to have that realization through poetry, that it's like, hey, I'm calling myself a writer, but the only pen that I have is a knife. And then I was like, oh yeah, that's because all of my words are have the potential to be used as a weapon, for good or bad, like as a tool even, And so yeah, I don't have the poem memorized, and hopefully one day I can revisit that and bring one up. But writing poetry has been a part of my existence before I ever started comedy, and I see the bridge so clearly now between the artwork that is, spoken or slam poetry and stand-up comedy. You know, the intention is to use words and throw people off, you know, lead them one way and bring them back a different way. Take them on a ride, express the dark sides of things. And a lot of people will call that dark humor or dark comedy. I call it bad comedy.
I'm glad you mentioned the cathartic response of music, and how much of that is with poetry, the cathartic kind of, I mean, do you feel different when you're holding a mic in your hand?
Yeah, I would just undeniably, I would have to say I've never thought about it, but now that you've asked me that question, probably totally, you know? Because, and I think a lot of people that I have come up in comedy with just in the last couple of years would agree that comedy, stand-up comedy, the performance aspect of it is the best drug on earth. You know, laughter and joy is so powerful. You know, people talk about how love is a drug, and it is. But I'm also in love with comedy, and I get high on stage almost every time I perform to a level that I've, you know, that I crave every time. So the addiction for me is already so powerful. Like I'm drunk on love, and I'm drunk on the adrenaline of performing. And every time I try to write new jokes, you know, because it's a constant process. The process of writing is the same for music, poetry, stand-up. You're gonna write things that you're not gonna use. You're gonna write things that is just like, all right, that's out of my system now, and yeah, it's all right. You know, it's not perfect, it's not great, but I may not use that kind of thing.
A lot of comedians, they seem to be happy every time you see them. They're always joking. They're all on stage. And I would imagine that a lot of viewers, casual viewers who don't know the comedians personally, and they see someone, they might assume that guy must have an amazing life. Happy all the time.
Oh yeah, he's a comedian.
Smiling all the time.
He's probably laughing and making jokes of everything, and everything's all, yeah.
Is it 24 hours of fun nonstop?
No, yeah. I think that's a good point that you bring up. It is very much, as you say, the behind the scenes, right? We have to go out there and sell a good time. You know, that's our job as a performer. Is, you know, we're doing this so that other people can feel something, so that they can laugh and maybe change, you know, potentially the outcome of their entire weekend. You know, it might even change a perspective just by hearing the way that somebody playfully uses those words. And it's hard to do that. And obviously keeping up that persona is part of the job too. You can't show up into a comedy show angry and pissed off and then, you know, go up on stage and be like, hey, what's up? You know, because if you're not, you know, gonna embody that type of energy, then it's gonna be kind of hard to pull off. So there is a level of acting and masking that I think every comedian has to throw on every now and then when they maybe aren't having a great day, but they have a gig coming up and they need to do a good job, you know? So it's like being able to process emotions from our off-stage life onto being on the stage. I'm sure every comedian, everyone has had that same struggle, you know?
How helpful is it to you therapeutically to tell the jokes, get on the stage, to kind of get through some of these not so nice moments?
The best way I can describe it is I think a lot of new comedians such as myself will start out talking about breakups, right? I would almost venture to bet that like 50% of people that start out doing comedy, their first handful of jokes or their first handful of minutes are about a relationship or a breakup, you know? Very easy thing to know personally to talk about that's funny to you. And I started out trash talking an ex-girlfriend or something like that, and it wasn't good. Jokes were terrible, but being able to write a joke well about something traumatic like a breakup or a divorce or losing a family member or something like that, you know, something very traumatic, being able to write a well-crafted joke about that very heartbreaking thing and for somebody else to come up afterwards and be like, man, that was so funny, that one joke that you wrote about, whatever, and being able to have a conversation about that. And because there's always, not always, but there generally with heartfelt and dark comedy, there's an origin story.
Yeah.
You know, so for people to come up and be like, wow, that was really funny, and then being able to have that secondary conversation of, oh, well, the reason why I wrote this joke is because of X, Y, and Z, and being able to kind of like relate to people about those experiences and having the off-scene conversations about even just one particular joke. You have one sentence of a joke, but there's maybe 5 or 6 years of anguish behind it, you know? And being able to relate to somebody who gets that joke brings people closer. It makes the jokes alive, you know?
How much does it matter to you when people do come up to you and from the audience and say something?
Give you kudos?
Yeah.
It's, you know, like when you see celebrities just trying to get into a building and there's like paparazzi out there and they have to wave and they have to, you know, maybe sign some stuff, but they're doing it all in the direction of where they're going to go anyway. You know, they're kind of not stopping. People are just kind of around them. I'm not famous, right? I'm not saying it's the same thing. There's no paparazzi around me. But when people are, after the show, wanting to get to know you and your jokes a little bit more, it's kind of in the same, you know, ball field, I feel like, where, yes, you're going to get kudos. You're going to get people who talk to you about things that want to learn more. And you just kind of have to keep, I do anyway, like the same direction, right? I don't want to sit there and say, yeah, I'm the greatest. Yeah. Oh, you like that joke? Come back next week and hear me tell that same joke again. It's more of like, thank you. Honestly, if somebody has a good experience and they're really talking you up, it's like, hey, you have no idea how much I appreciate that value, that one, hey, good job, may go for a comedian. And it's just like, I have to, there's never an end goal, you know, there's never like you're done, you finished comedy. You know, there's always progression, there's always more, there's always, you know, growing. And when people come up and acknowledge that, one, that goes a long way, but two, it's just like, yes, thank you, and I'm gonna continue. I'm gonna keep making people laugh. Come on back, you know, like, yeah. I want this to grow.
And I know sometimes, especially before I started getting into this whole, you know, open mic, performance, whatever it is I'm doing, if I did see someone great, I would probably be afraid to talk to them and tell them.
Yeah, there's that too.
I would be like, oh, I don't want to be obnoxious. I don't want to bother someone. And even to this day, if someone does a great job, and I tend to step back, like let everyone else say congratulations, because I'm like, I don't want to bother them. Everyone knows I'm here. I just, and I think that's what I'm trying to get around to in an awkward way is to encourage people to not be afraid.
Yeah.
To go up to the performer.
Yeah.
And to say something nice, whatever it is.
Yeah, because like we said, it's not always hunky dory for the comedians. It's a lot of hard work, and for people to acknowledge the hard work and the craft that you've done, it does go a long way. It goes, it could make the difference in that comedian's whole weekend also, you know? As well as you could do of a job and make, you know, somebody's night at a performance, you could do the same thing for that comedian. And I've seen people go up and, you know, a lot of the free shows will offer like, hey, if you like the comedians, tip the comedians kind of thing. And I've seen people be so generous to comedians that are especially traveling from out of town and, you know, making an effort out of their schedule and their life to be there is, you know, I've seen that go pretty far too. So I've been seeing a lot of support from the spectators in the community as it's growing, and all these different shows popping up everywhere, which is excellent. You know, people are craving to see these shows. They want to see what we're working on, and they know that we're all amateur, low-level, open micing, indie show comedians, right? I'm not a headliner anywhere. I'm not on Netflix, right?
Yeah.
I'm a guy who's starting out in his first couple of years of his career doing comedy, like a lot of the people in that same time frame, and people are like paying attention to that. They know that this is the origin story of a lot of comedians, and they're eager to see us progress, to see us write new jokes, to see how much longer our sets get, and to be there on that journey with us, you know? So follow us on that journey.
Yes.
And
And if you see someone you like, don't be afraid to tell him or her or them.
You can't make it to the show, shout out a flyer. Hey, can't be there, but my good homie comedian Fart McGee is going to be there on Friday night, that kind of thing. There's help that can be done from the community that isn't necessarily in the form of paying for a ticket. Yeah. It could just be like this, Hey, here's meet Taylor, Mike's doing the work here for the community.
Yeah, and there's so many times, at least myself, where I have been thinking, I'm done. It's not worth it. It's not worth the stress. And then if someone comes up and says something nice, that makes all the difference in the world. And sometimes I have kept going because some person in the audience said something nice to me, and I said, you know what, I'm going to try this again.
Yeah.
So please continue to do things like that if you like what you see, and otherwise you're not going to see it anymore. So if you don't like what you see, keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, no, comedians, we need the audience. We need you guys, all right? It'd be awkward if we didn't have you. Yeah. And trust me, we tried.
A lot of your jokes are a little bit, how shall we say, X-rated, R-rated, I don't know.
Adult material, yeah. Rated M for mature.
Yeah, it's like I noticed how people love your joke about milk. and we can't even tell you what this milk joke is other than it's delicious.
You'll have to come and see it.
Yeah, so come and see, and you can ask for the milkman and ask him what that means. We're not going to explain it here today.
I would love if anybody who sees this and meets me out in public and you're like, oh, the milkman, I think I would probably piss my pants laughing if somebody just knew me from somewhere as the milkman or the milk guy. That'd be excellent.
Let's put that on a shirt.
Yeah. Oh, the merch ideas I have I've got so many great merch ideas, but I mean, you gotta pay for t-shirts. Speaking of which, you got me hooked up with the Smoking Poetry one.
Yes.
So I'm gonna definitely be repping that around. Like you said, it's been we've been pretty serious in talking about comedy in the business aspect, but I mean, as far as the jokes go, I've been working on a new bit talking about an ex-girlfriend that I had who loved watching those reality TV shows. Like Love Island and like Love is Blind and those kinds of things, and I was never really into it, but I would watch them with her because I wanted to get laid. But
good reason.
Yeah, the thing I started thinking about it later, and I was like, I probably in retrospect that probably should have been a good indicator that the relationship was not going well. When I had to start watching Love Island to save the relationship, And a lot of people think I'm just like trash talking these TV shows, but that's not true, because after 3 or 4 beers, I'll like, all right, turn it off. Turn it off. She'll be like, why? We just started, it just started getting good. And I'm like, I know. And here's the thing. Danny is never going to be with Samantha, okay? They're not compatible, and then I get super into the show. So as much as I hated having to suffer through these, these terrible TV shows, eventually at some point I would come around and be like, this is brilliant. This is so much fun. So I've been trying to find a way to like talk about these trash TV shows in a way where I kind of like bash them in the beginning of the joke, and then by the end of the joke you're like, but I'm a huge fan, and that's one of the things that's like I said, you could have a traumatic experience. I was with this terrible girlfriend for a few years. And that's a few years worth of material, right? Mm-hmm. That I've been trying to carefully work on in like 5 or 6 sentences, to talk about one thing about that traumatic, relationship that I was in. And that is, like you were asking before, how do you process through? How good does it feel to process through some of the trauma? Well, that's that was a little example. That was me spending 3 hours the other night going like, all right, but I kind of like trashy TV shows, And that's the writing process for me, and saying like, okay, what's the opposite side of this, Yeah. Here's my opinion. What is the opposite of my opinion, and how do I bring them together,
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that you could do that. And I also want to thank you not just for coming on my show and sharing this, but I want to thank you personally for what you're doing, having these stages at the Block and Wackadoo Brewing. And last night from recording, not from release, I got to go up there, and I don't know if I was any good, but I had to get some stuff off my chest. And I had to get up there and scream. And I don't know if I was funny or not, but it was such a great feeling.
Oh, it was hard to tell with that whole room last night. It was a rough one, guys. That was, whew. It was a very cold crowd for a lot of the show. But, and that's, good point that I haven't really pitched before is the show that goes on downtown every month on Saturday nights. It'll be the second Saturdays at the Block. It is a showcase where we bring the best comedians with the best content, but we also follow it up with an open mic. So all the working comedians here in Springs get a good Saturday night spot in a downtown location. I'm hoping that more Denver crowds come down here because, Colorado Springs goes up to Denver all the time and tries to work the scene up there as well, and to extend that and kind of have like a both ways kind of thing, giving people spots to perform in front of new audiences is like, it's beneficial for you, it's beneficial for me, it's beneficial for the venue, it's beneficial for the people, for us to have more spaces and more time to work out our sets, to build longer sets, to write new jokes, to test out the things that we thought were going to work that maybe didn't, you know. And so come out to the open mic on Saturday nights. Thanks for reminding me of that one too.
You're right. And speaking of open mics, I gotta talk about Ultra Flat Black, where we are here. And every Tuesday night, 8 o'clock sharp. Well, maybe not sharp always, honestly. But 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock-ish.
We start up open mic. You can sign up at 7. And whatever you have on your mind, whether you're a comedian, a poet, musician, magician, we've had dancer, or you just have something you want to say. I'd say one of the most rewarding experiences I have had is when something happened to me. And it wasn't necessarily a funny thing or anything that I had a poem for, but I just wanted to tell a story and get something off my chest. Open mic is the place for that. And that can be one of the most rewarding, cathartic experiences, whether 2 people show up or whether there's 30 people or show up. Just being able to
be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Put yourself out there. Showcase your craft. There's art around here. Ultra Flat, since we're shouting them out, pretty much has their fingers in every art form. DJing, graphic design, graffiti art. If you can design something or put something together artistically and creatively, freaking come out to Ultra Flat and tell the world about it, because that's what they're doing, in my opinion. Yeah. They're like, this is a spot for the people, and exactly. I feel like they've done a really good job doing justice. I mean, that whole wall is filled with flyers of comedians up there, and the walls behind us are filled with paintings and art. So
every Tuesday open mic, every first Friday of every month, we have the Poetry Slam, which is so much fun, with both an open mic portion and a Poetry Slam portion, and many other events. So follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and check out Ultra Flat Black. And check out Bad Comedy.
Oh yeah, that's right. Don't forget.
Anything else we need to talk about before we say goodbye for the week?
I think we pretty much summed it up. Everybody wear seatbelts,
All right.
Stay safe out there.
Well, thank you so much. And
yes,
check out
Mike,
Smoking Poetry Podcast and Ultra Flat Black and Bad Comedy.
Hello, you guys.
See you next time.
That was fun. It was nice to